require.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary Yellen, for joining us today. Secretary, you told Dr. Winstrup that corporate tax revenues had decreased significantly since enactment of the GOP tax reform in 2017, and that's not consistent with the facts. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce for the record this report by the Tax Foundation, which cites official CBO data.
So ordered.
You know, after the GOP tax reform in 2017, corporate tax revenues for the first half of fiscal year are already 22% higher than last year, and last year was already a record high in terms of tax receipts. So I just wanted that on the record that actually the tax reform did result in higher tax receipts. You know, it kind of seems a little bit, we've talked a lot about different things. Today kind of seems like Groundhog Day from a year ago when Republicans talked a lot about inflation and the concerns and where we were going. And at that point in time, it was being called transitory, and now we're being told that it's not the administration's fault. You know, I go back a little bit. Some of these things have already been mentioned, but, you know, there's a lot of economists, including Democrats like Larry Summers and Jason Furman, who were sounding alarm bells. Republicans on the committee were sounding alarm bells. You know, last year, I'd like to enter several op-eds that I entered last year. One from July 1st of 2021, an op-ed entitled "Biden's Economic Crisis, His Wasteful Spending Will Crush the Recovery. Here's what we have to do." An August 6th, 2021 op-ed entitled "Fiscal Conservatism is Still the Best Way to Beat Inflation." And an October 6th, 2021 op-ed titled "Temporary Inflation is Still Here." I'd like to enter those to record. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've talked to folks in town halls. Last year in October, 98% of the respondents said they've seen a price increase on regular necessities that they have. In January of this year, 62% of respondents in my district to one of these surveys talked about rising prices, one of the most important issues facing our country. But it wasn't until May 10th of this year that President Biden said inflation was his top domestic priority. Why did it take you and President Biden so long to recognize this issue as an issue for American families and small businesses?
Well, first of all, when President Biden was elected, the United States faced enormous challenges in terms of the pandemic and in terms of joblessness. And a critical priority was getting people back to work and making sure they had enough to eat and didn't lose the roofs over their heads. So there were a number of economic challenges, but if you had to rank them, I think the single most serious threat was a prolonged downturn in the economy that would have been a threat to family well-being. And from that perspective, the American Rescue Plan was hugely successful. We have a full employment economy now. After the financial crisis, it took a decade to regain full employment. There's no question, though, that inflation is too high now and that we need to address it. It has many causes. And when you see that countries all around the world and developed countries, UK has 9% inflation, Germany 8%, we're not the only country suffering from that.
I thank
Oil
the gentleman.
prices have risen. The president is doing everything that he can to address the challenge of high inflation.
I'm sorry, I'm out of
Thank you,
time. I
Madam.
have so many more questions. I'll yield
Thank
back.
you, Mr. Estes, and